Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm sitting here with 10 great facilitators to record episode 50 as one big experiment. So we're sitting in a circle like a fishbowl. We have 2 microphones, and we will discuss about the topic, what makes workshops work. And we'll start with a set of questions. But maybe before we start that, I wanted to take just 1 minute to articulate my appreciation and my gratitude to all the 50 guests that have been on the show and who have been my mentors, teachers, guides to make workshops work. It has been a beautiful journey of growth. And I think for those who have listened to the very first episodes, they can definitely tell the difference. Also the language that I'm using. And I get more and more questions on how I actually select my podcast guests. And I came to realize that I actually practice. Luckily, I came to realize that I'm practicing what I preach. So in my workshops, it's my goal to really flatten the room. So independent of hierarchy or roles or whoever the person is behind the name tag, they all have the same space and the same room to articulate themselves, as long as they have something to say and they have something to contribute. And in the podcast, I follow the same kind of guidelines. That independent of whether someone is famous in the scene, someone had a big name or no name, as long as they have something interesting to share, and as long as they spark my curiosity, I just assume that they will also spark the curiosity of the audience. And then I give them a slot and I just dig deeper. And so far it has worked. So I'm looking forward to more episodes, more learning, more inspiration. And now I'm inviting my first partner, Mireille, episode 30.
Thank you, Miriam.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
So when we organize a workshop, usually we get the briefing with our client, and then they tell us what the purpose of the workshop is. And very often it happens that we step into the room and we realize that actually
participants needs totally something else.
Exactly.
And the purpose, the client tells us, is it really the purpose he wants, or the purpose what's playing in the organization or what's happening in the organization? Most of the times, is my experience, it's something different. Mm-hmm. There is something different going on, or maybe it's not something different going on, but something else needs attention first before the question which the client asks is solved.
So how do you assure that everyone in the room has the same understanding? Do you solve this before the workshop or in the room itself?
It's the golden rule of every facilitator: preparation. Mm-hmm. I think that's all facilitators know. To prepare yourself is not only talking and having a talk with the client, but also with the participants. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons, the most information you really need to design a good session. Mm-hmm. Not only having the client talk, but also ask the participants, what do you really need? Mm-hmm. And what do you really want to get out? What do you want to get out of this session? And if you heard that, it can change. And then you have another question, another talk with the client.
Yeah. So who else is having interviews with their workshop participants before the session? Shane, do you want to join in and tell us how you make sure that everyone is aligned on the same purpose?
Sure, thank you. So you were talking about being prepared and always starting. You start with the end in mind and end with the start in mind.
To be honest, somebody even told me before, not start with the end in mind, but what's happening after the end in mind, and then design your meeting.
The actual follow-up.
Yeah, the follow-up. Yeah, but also the evaluation, what's going to be implemented. And it's so easy to prepare to facilitate a meeting only with participants and making results. It's more like, what are their really needs and what benefits do they want from this session? And then with that in mind, then you have to prepare your session.
So what do you reveal before the session? Because some sessions that, as you go through, if they know too much, they preempt the exercises and make their lives easy.
Yeah, that's true. That's also true. And I think you have to plant some little seeds in the brains of the participants to keep them thinking, or to start them thinking about the session and about their needs. And you don't want to have argued so many in our brains before the session so that the session will be totally dead during the session. But having them preparing and just planting a little bit seeds and keep them thinking, or start their thinking, that really helps starting a session. But how are you doing that?
Yeah, so I tend to reveal the top line level of what's going to happen to all the participants, and I ask that certainly any decision makers are there to, in the pre-meeting. And often it does change, exactly like you were describing. But we often find also that it changes anyway in the middle. You were talking earlier about how you learn something and it changes mid-session because there's some aspect that the client hasn't quite resolved but needs to continue. And that happens in the kind of workshops I do, it happens more than half the time. We call it playing jazz because you're always with two people.
Yeah, freestyle, improvise.
Yeah, and you're with two people and you kind of know your instruments. It's always always work in pairs. So one very left brain person, one very right brain person. And you have to, play jazz together.
Right.
How do you do it?
Yeah, know your part. Well, it's interesting. I get pulled into a lot of meetings, super hot, right? So, Jeremy, come help us, right? We recognize that you sort of grease the wheels of communication. Help us talk about this thing. So, I don't have the luxury very often of any preparation. So, I come in hot. I actually stole this from Patrick from episode 1, actually. His check-in and remixed a little bit. The 3 favorite questions I love to ask in order to get people started and at least align in the here and now is, who are you? What do you want to accomplish? And why is that important to you? Right? By getting not only what they want to accomplish, what's the underlying motivation? What will that help you accomplish? What makes that so important?
Have you seen many times where you've got a group of people and their answer to why is that important to you is different for everybody?
Oh, absolutely. I think by far and away, that's the most interesting insight. Of course, when they don't even agree on what they want to accomplish, that happens quite often. But yeah, why they want to accomplish is always very personal.
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing some stories today about some of the unusual situations that we're in. I saw one where they were in conflict, and in the conflict there were these two opposing department heads, and each one of them would stand when they talked, and the other one would sit. And so between the two, you said this sort of seesaw forward and backwards across both sides of the room.
The physical power dynamic.
The physical power dynamic. It was quite interesting to see.
Who's next? Come on, save me here.
How do you make sure that everybody's got a role?
I'm Rain, and I don't have to make sure everybody has a role because just by being there, they have a role, even if they don't take a role.
What if they just wander to the back of the room and pull out their mobile phone? And what role are they playing then actively?
Then they're playing the role of somebody who is being detached from whatever is going on in the room. And I can observe that and ask the person in question or the group if that's okay. And if it's okay, so be it. If it's not okay, then they can do something about it.
May I challenge that, Rain?
Of course you can. I wouldn't expect less than that.
Awesome. So, from my experience, as soon as someone doesn't have a role, they kind of invent a role for themselves, and then they might hijack the meeting or the workshop just because they want, out of cognitive dissonance, prove themselves that they have a right to be there. And this might drive the entire conversation into a different direction.
Yes, and I fully agree with that, and that is a role. So that's what I meant with the fact that you don't have to give people roles because they will take a role, but they'll have a role.
So how do you prevent individuals to hijack the conversation by taking a role that might not help the group to really
Very
move
simple.
forward?
Well, simple. It's simpler said than done, but the key there is to just ask if the person feels there is a need for them to be there.
And here's Nadja, and I'd like to add something. So preventing the hijacking is already that I am so important in the process, and I always delegating the responsibility to the group. So if someone is going out of this room and is in the back side on the room, is not taking the role, I had it was one CEO, so he was always in the back, and even we invited him all the time to the front to join us, he always removed himself physically. And at one point at a time, we just stopped taking the responsibility on us as a facilitator and tell, okay, the group needs to feel how it is if your manager is not with you and even not strengthen you back, but really removes himself. So the group needs this feeling, this emotion, and you have to hold the space for them so they feel safe, even in that process, so they don't feel like, okay, the facilitator is not doing anything to our boss, so we need someone who helps us.
What did I do to you as a facilitator? How did it make you feel?
That he is going away? Mm-hmm. Nothing, I'm just observing. I'm helping the group. So if in the group there is someone who is doing well, in school, we have this grades and you're doing well, you're not doing well, you have A, you have C. So the same in a group. If I'm a teacher, then I have a co-responsibility. If I'm not teaching them, I'm not responsible for what is happening. I help them to observe themselves, I help them to move on, then I am with them, but not for them.
Hi, Nadia. It's Max joining you.
Yeah.
And I have this question popping up. Like, when is it difficult not to act as a facilitator? When you really want to, but you should not. What's your experience on that?
I would really say, like, something you really keep yourself then from doing it. So you have to, like, count 1, 2, 3, like, keep silence, for example.
Yeah. And in what situation would you apply that?
When I don't want to be responsible for what is happening.
Exactly.
I want the group to be responsible, because then it's their baby and they love it because they did it.
Yeah, for me also, when there's a bigger group, for instance, you can have some people having really questioned faces when you give instructions, and then most of the times when you leave it to the group, it'll resolve itself. But if you start explaining again, you fall into the trap of over-explanation, which isn't good for the process.
Max, Mireille here, I really recognized that over-explanation. And that makes me thinking, sometimes you also have as facilitator assumptions. You want to over-explanate and you think, you are not getting it. And then I thought, then you have to say, no, stay neutral. And that's something what happens with me, but how do you deal with that? When sometimes you have assumption about the participants.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how to deal with it. Sometimes you change the program midway when you're assuming participants are not there on the topic, or you're not addressing the right topic for them. But sometimes I just follow the plan. It's just a gut feel I use. Last week I had a group that I felt wasn't really thrilled about my workshop. And when I had this survey afterwards, the first 3 I have in now, they scored 9 out of 10. So I was amazed, but I was really proven wrong that my assumption for their not being there, it was really wrong. So yeah, maybe I'm not the right person to ask that question.
But maybe you're want to have so many results and such an idea what to do with participants, and that for you really want to have many results, but for the participants a little bit results is also okay. And that's because we as facilitators, we know so much and participants knows less, and for them sometimes a little bit less is also okay.
Marlijn here.
Welcome.
I'm triggered by 2 words you just mentioned. We should be neutral, and we know so much.
That's quite different, yeah?
Like bullshit.
I didn't help myself.
I really don't believe in neutrality. I think I am the most valuable for the group if I can oversize what's going on there and what's going on there. I'm not being neutral. I'm stressing out what's being there.
But not being neutral, a question what I get a lot is, as a facilitator, sometimes you know a lot about the content. Maybe you're sometimes it happens. And just a question, when you know a lot about the content, and you may sometimes a facilitator also have to do something with the content, and you want to stay neutral, how do you deal with that? Maybe it's not for you, Raisin, but if a facilitator has both, how would you deal with that?
It's actually not my first-hand experience, indeed. But if I would be in that place, then I would ask a second facilitator, colleague, to assist me and be there with me on the non-expert side of it. But actually, I'm always hired, and I'm always coming from the outside. I'm the non-expert, and I can be totally focusing on the process and the group dynamics. So how's that experience for you, Boaz?
Yeah, hi, Boaz here. Well, I mean, as a Swiss person, I of course wanted to say something about neutrality. I think being neutral is something that is also some way of just not being part of the conflict, which it's an advantage because you're kind of out of it. You don't have to participate.
Where's the conflict coming from?
Well, I think it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's always there. If you're within the room, there's always different opinions. There's always different perspectives. And being the neutral person is something, it's an idea, but I think it's not something that's really real because you always have an opinion. You always make judgment. You can't not make judgment. You see something and your brain automatically does that. And I think that's for me also the second part. I think it's not about knowing things or not knowing things. I think it's very much about this balance in between. I need to be somehow competent. I need to understand what people are saying to bring it back to mirror what they are saying. Yeah. If I completely have no idea what they're talking about, it becomes very difficult. On the other hand, of course, they themselves are the experts. So I think it's very much about always finding this balance in between knowing things and really not knowing things.
I like finding the sweet spot of conflict and trying to really zoom into that. And, there's a psychological rule that if you enlarge the conflict, then you actually enlarge the social awareness of the group. So people tend to get into this we mode more when you stress out the differences.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. If I remember correctly, there was also a podcast episode about welcoming the conflict by Meg. And I think that's something that struck me very much, like how conflict is something inevitable, but it's really part of it and how you should welcome it that's for me something also as a facilitator, especially as an external facilitator, you come in, you see certain conflict, you make observation, you see difficult people, but then you also leave again. And the teams are left with those people, are left with those dynamics. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, this is Frans. Well, I see my role as a facilitator most importantly to get those people to realize where the conflict is coming from. Because often in facilitation situations, people hide their real concerns that they actually have. And drawing them out, I see that as an important factor that I can give a group as a facilitator. If I try to intervene on a subject and I really want to contribute something that's not neutral, that is really my opinion, I even use a relatively simple technique, just stepping one step to the side and saying, okay, I'm leaving my role as a facilitator and now I'm coming in as an expert, as this is my opinion, this is what I think about it. There's always making that distinction clear when you're actually the neutral facilitator that tries to guide the conversation and making sure that they know when you're contributing content. That's actually a very nice tool and people understand it immediately because it's so physical.
+5 for the recognition of where the conflict is coming from. So My name is Jeremy. I don't know anything about neutrality per se, but what I do know is I want to make space for both sides of the argument, right? That's how I can create at least an even playing field, so we can go through the arbitrage or the discussion, so that we can integrate those differences by making sure that we've got space for all of the information, insight, ideas to get out there on the table and figure out what to do next from there.
Yeah. And then building on that, if you really ask the question, why do you think that Jeremy thinks like this? How can he be so of a different opinion than yourself? That really helps people to take a pause and actually go think about what the other side is saying, and not just being in a competition to have the best arguments.
For sure. Yeah, so the question that pops up when you make mention that is this idea of, so what do you think that the other side sees that you don't, or that I don't, right? So what's their insight? Tell me.
Thank you, Jeremiah. And I think just hearing your conversation about difficult people, sometimes you have somebody who's really not wanting it and you want them being happy in the session. And I think the golden rule for that is giving all people attention. Everybody wants to be heard. Even if you have a bad day or you don't agree with the content or you don't want to be there. We all are people. We all are human. We all want to be heard.
Absolutely.
And I think that's maybe also a difficult part for a facilitator. Having attention for the whole group and having attention for the people who need sometimes a little bit more attention.
Really need space. One thing, so how do you make space for people? Right?
I just want to ask that question to you. How do you make space for people? And I think that it's not only about difficult people, but for whole people, also for the introvert people or people who are not so just yelling, just call me. But I see Frans is coming up.
Yes.
How do you make space, Frans?
The interesting thing is that I always look at the bigger group.
Yeah.
So don't have a big group wait to explain to one person and get them on board. So get the other people going and then spend one-on-one time with the person that's actually having difficulty following the script, so to say, or not having a good idea on what the plan of the meeting is.
But how do you deal with when you have really big groups? Because that's your specialty, I understand, dealing with or facilitating big groups. Yeah. Groups like more than 100 people, maybe? 100, 200, 300 people. Yeah, and what you actually do is, of course, you have a lot of co-facilitators most of the time. So they can give special attention to groups, smaller groups. But just have what I sometimes call an introduction class. Just have a special group, a special table, people who really cannot join in the bigger picture of the session. Have them at a special table and talk to them and find something that they really want to do. Often those groups, although they don't follow the script, they still have very valuable ideas.
And that is actually already answering or building on what I had in mind. Hi, Miriam here. I realized that many of the conflict can actually disappear magically if you just find one ally for this disturbing person. Yep. So just by giving them a group and giving them the feeling that they're not alone and they're not kind of weird because they feel differently than all the others, then suddenly most of the conflicts just vanish.
That's my experience also. Yeah. And let them work from there. People aren't stupid. They have a reason for being and not agreeing with something. Exploring that is very valuable. But it doesn't mean you have to hijack the whole meeting.
Exactly. And usually we are coming from a point where we are desperate for joining an in-group. Or I think as human beings, we don't like to be on ourselves and isolated. So if we start to hijack a meeting, or if we're one of those disturbing people, it's usually out of a place where we either don't have a role or we really feel uncomfortable. So as soon as we either find an ally so that we realize, okay, it's not just me, I'm not isolated, or we get a role, okay, maybe it's me to put on this hat to challenge everything that has been said, then you can use this kind of disturbance in a very productive, constructive way.
Hi, this is Andrew. I'm a facilitator and head of customer success at Session Lab, the dynamic workshop planner tool. More than 30,000 facilitators, trainers, and coaches use our workshop planner tool and save time and effort in the design process. So, how do they do it? Our drag and drop agenda builder makes it easy to transform your ideas into high-quality workshops, and the timing of your agenda automatically updates when you make changes. You can collaborate in real time with your colleagues and easily share professional-looking printouts with your clients. And if you need inspiration, you can check out our library of more than 500 activities and exercises and simply drag the ones you need right into your workshop agenda. So check out Session Lab to save time and effort in your workshop design process. And now get your first 2 months of Session Lab Pro absolutely free at sessionlab.com/workshopswork.
Hi, this is Renato. So I've worked a lot with young people, and when you work with young people, sometimes, especially in the mornings, they haven't had any food. And so you come into a classroom and they're all, maybe a lot of them are heads down on the table, right? So this idea of neutrality, how do you hold that? I think we place neutrality in the wrong place. We place neutrality in the personality. And from my mindfulness perspective, this is an aspect of the mind. So you can train yourself to be neutral in your own mind. And that gives you the capacity to receive and accept what's going on. So with those young people, like I don't do anything with them because there's an aspect of which they're emotionally not ready for it, right? They're telling me that actually they can't deal with what's going on right now. So why not just let them do that? They've already been hassled by the teachers and the institutions and everybody else. So first let them have that. And then slowly through the process of the group, widening it up, widening the questions, they realize that the space is safe enough to actually engage with. And so then they pick themselves up and then they can come in at their own level of their emotional maturity. And if you rip it out of them too early on, actually you'll lose them and you'll never get them back. And they'll never engage in that deeper conversation. So finding your own space in yourself and developing what I would call the observer mind, this neutral part of ourselves, gives you then the capacity to engage at a really deep level. And then you can bring that into bigger groups, because the personality, even as a Buddhist monk, I didn't like a lot of people. Right.
So this is
you've got to be true. I mean, this is the reality of it, isn't it? We don't like a lot of people. I don't like a lot of people, right? But that doesn't mean that I can't be with them or acknowledge them or welcome them in or any of that stuff. I mean, and this is a lot of the conflict that we have in the world right now, is that we're not willing to engage with other people that are not holding our own views. Hello, Max.
Hello. So I was really inspired about your words about being neutral with yourself and giving young people their space, and that they would join in the conversation later. But I also recall that, for instance, a manager was at the other side of the room watching on his or her phone while the group was participating in a workshop. Yeah. How would you relate what you just said about the youngsters?
So it's actually the same thing. That? So when I ran my family camps, I said to the kids, you can do whatever you want, just please be in the room. All I wanted them was to be in the room, right? So they played their Xbox, their things or whatever. You don't know. You never really know with these people. What happens if he's texting his wife? What happens if he doesn't understand the language and he's using a translator, which has happened a lot to me? Like you get upset and you think, get off your phone. Actually, no, they're using it to try to understand what you're saying. So you need to check out with the situation about actually what is the person doing. And if they really don't want to be in the room, they don't want to be in the room. You're not going to convert them. You haven't got the time. That you're a facilitator, even with a large group of co-facilitators. You can only do so much. But you can say, you're welcome to be here. My golden rule is don't disturb the space, right? Don't be violent or pushy or that. Anything else can go. Because maybe you don't know what they're listening to. You don't know how they're listening, right? Maybe one conversation that somebody else says out here just triggers enough for that person just to get their insight, and this ability to step back from all the blah, 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 and all of that, which does require a hell of a lot of energy. You know, it requires to train yourself to do it. You can really say, okay, mate, it's fine. You know,
I usually when someone steps aside from the process in the workshop, I leave him be for a while. But in a later moment, I asked them to join back in, maybe to help a subgroup out with their thoughts, or I asked them in a bigger group what their thoughts are, what have just been seen or heard, but I do intervene to help the person which stepped out or who stepped out to step back in. So I wouldn't leave it be all the time. As a matter of fact, I once had a manager sitting on the side and just watching his or her group, which was not, in my opinion, not good for the group atmosphere and for the working atmosphere at that moment. And I asked the manager to leave if he didn't want to participate. He chose to participate.
Agreed.
He agreed to jump back in.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. And we confuse neutrality with annihilism. And neutrality is actually flexible.
Rein, Mireille here. What will be our next subject?
Well, it's funny you asked that, Mireille. This is Rein, because I was thinking exactly the same. And from where I'm coming from is I was reflecting on the experience of doing a fishbowl like this.
And what were your thoughts which are coming up?
First of all, my feeling was of discomfort.
Why? Oh.
Because I felt I was falling short of keeping track of what was being discussed.
Feels it like a mess or something? Or
No, I wouldn't say that. It's just that I found it very difficult to my attention to the different topics that were being discussed. But I'm actually really curious to know what you're feeling.
But before when you describe this, it looks like participants in a meeting were discussing all subjects which you won't want to discuss because they have no focus. They are going like a monkey mind, like bloop, 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 to all different parts. And I can imagine, and I think, to be honest, I feel a little bit the same. Because what I mentioned in my own thoughts is that sometimes I need time to make up my own mind. And that's a part of me. For me, it's difficult to really have my own opinion directly when I hear all the different opinions of other participants. I need, in my brain, that's how my brain's working, I need a little bit more time to process, to think about what do I think, what I'm thinking, what's my opinion? Do I go with you or with you or with you? And when a discussion is going very fast, like this subject, like this subject, that's for me difficult to follow.
Yeah. And what I experienced as well is I wanted to ask this question just on the seat because I felt that we're talking about things rather than looking at what we're actually currently experiencing.
Yeah.
And it was a dichotomy for me because I appreciate that there is a wealth of experience, expertise, and wisdom in this room that I want to benefit from. And at the same time, it seemed all very cerebral to me. Cerebral.
There's a difference between talking and feeling.
Correct.
Yeah. I can imagine what you're saying. I think I feel the same. And when it's happening in a fishbowl, what can you do about it? How can you change? Because this can also happening in a meeting or in a workshop.
The question is actually inviting to talk about it again rather than reflect on real experience. Hello, Marjolein.
Hi, Rein.
How are you?
I'm feeling the same discomfort. Nice. And I was wondering if we could tap into that discomfort some more.
Yes.
And?
To be honest, I feel much less discomfort now.
That was a secret hug we did they don't see on the podcast.
Exactly. Well,
there's no video.
You don't need to see it. It was there. It was there. And I think somebody said, I don't know, well, I've heard it in the discussion, somebody said, and I think it was actually you and Nadia at check-in that we are the most important instrument, who we are, our presence, just being present in a moment. And not, I actually paraphrasing wrong, I think, here, because it's not we are the most important instrument. What I think is that presence of everybody is the most important instrument.
So is it that what you do that makes workshops work when you have this discomfort or any other emotion? Do you bring it in explicitly and just lay it there on the table of the whole group? Well, sorry, Rain, maybe Nadia, you can answer my question.
I just jumped in, and thank you, Rain, for bringing it up and for making us, bringing us on different level and making us feel present, not only in the mind, but also in the full body. And what was the question?
Do you feel up for bringing that discomfort or any other emotion that comes up right there at that moment in the group? Do you feel like doing that?
Yeah, I feel like doing that. And I think that's a kind of method we can use. So bringing the discussion on this meta level. So we're not talking about the topic. We are talking about how are we doing what we are doing. And this brings a lot of clarity.
So thank you, Nadia. This is Max jumping in. And while jumping in, I just wanted to check where part of my discomfort came from. And I saw the same discomfort in the eyes of Marjolein. It's because we have a fishbowl with more than 10 participants, and we're invited to have discussions with the two of us. And when a new person jumps in, you need to break into that discussion. You need to talk to someone new while the person you were talking to is disappearing out of sight. And it's really hard to talk to someone and then all of a sudden talk to no one again, and then talk in your same story to someone completely different. And that's an observation I make, which is part of where my discomfort is rooted in. Hi, Shane. Welcome.
Hi, Max. Thanks. One of the things that often helps with that is to inform everybody who's participating beforehand what their experience is going to be. And often when we run workshops over a period of days, we'll take that arc of trajectory of what's happening and talk about, because often it's the hero's journey. If you think about the hero's journey in a film, you're approaching the goal, you think you're going to make it, you fail, you come back, you learn something new, you climb the mountain, you go down the other side, and there's some kind of resolution.
Yeah.
So that can often be easier determined when there's a set of either constraints on what the rules are for the game, and then you can think about how the emotional experience of the game is going to be as it processes through. Welcome.
Hello, it's Renato here. So just to give you a little clue, so we have a little card here. It says it's being passed around the group. It says your turn, pass it on if you take the mic. It's a sort of reminder. So I got given this maybe 10 minutes ago. And my inner teenager got really upset and thought, I'm not going to do that. So I held on to the card. So it's interesting that Rain asked such a good question, and yet we sort of avoided the actually answering it in a way, which is like, how is it for us right now? Like we keep going back into process rather than, and it's that's the shadow of being a facilitator, that we are a group of facilitators, and actually we don't have a facilitator here for our group, right? We don't have somebody outside our group actually holding the space. So
it's a great idea to rename the card. We say to this card now, you are facilitator. And,
nice one.
In mid-game, we change the situation. And then
we pass the facilitation around. Ah, that's a skillful way.
That resolves it. Over to you, France.
Oh, wow.
You are now
that's
facilitated
awesome.
to do as you wish.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
So I cannot hold back but jump into this conversation now. It's Miriam speaking.
Welcome.
And I just want to use 1 second to reflect on what's happening here, because I think it's beautiful, and also maybe about my own discomfort of I invited to this experiment and I had a vague idea of how this fishbowl could look like. And now something is happening. I just trusted that the group will make something out of it. So we have a set of questions. I called it food for fish in the corner. And then I would just trust that this group of facilitators would jump in and have a conversation about what makes workshops work. And then at one point we came to this moment where we felt discomfort. So we tried to tackle this discomfort. And then, as was pointed out, our comfort zone is coming back to process. So we reflect on the process. And now we're coming back to structure. Okay, so we feel discomfort. We feel uncertain about what's going on. Okay, so what do we need? We need someone to hold the space and to be the facilitator. And let's just pass this on.
Yes, because let me just ask a very simple question. What subject or what feeling about facilitating would you like to hear the opinion of other people? Or what would you like to express yourself? Just take a moment and think what is actually something that you would like to hear the opinion of somebody else. And then people who have answers can join in, just like a fishbowl is intended. So, Shane, can I ask you, for instance? I'm really going to facilitate now. Shane, can I ask you, what is, in your experience, one of the things that you are very curious about how other facilitators deal with in facilitating?
Actually, I'd like to know, from any of you, what brings you the most joy from the transformation in the room? Because there's always a transformation in any workshop. And what is it for you that brings you joy?
What brings me joy? So first and foremost, hi, Jeremy here. I get literally high off of the collective energy, just being in the shared space with other people. So I find it so exciting just to be within the container and to be making sense of the world together. Hi, Marjolein.
That's nice.
Muriel. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It's the main, it's almost the same. That's a nice answer, Jeremy. And when I took the same answer of the same question as Frans asked you, what brings you the most joy as a facilitator? I think for me, it's when people conclude that they know more than they think that they know. So people are interacting with each other and 1 + 1 is 3. And people can do more, know more than they really think they can do and they know.
This is Rain speaking again.
Sitting with Marjolein again.
Hi, Marjolein. I really felt that I'd like to come back because I was starting to feel really disappointed.
Bring it on.
And
yeah, so what? I felt disappointed in the sense that I was really relishing the discomfort in the room. And the fact that Miriam had dared to initiate an unstructured, very well prepared but unstructured evening and discussion. And the moment we got into acknowledging our discomfort, we all scrambled, or not all, but as a collective, we scrambled to deal with the discomfort. Whereas it is my firm belief that creation and growth only happens in discomfort.
So your disappointment is about?
The fact that this feeling of discomfort seemed to be taken away and patched up.
Nadia here, can't sit still. I like to connect here to you because I don't feel discomfort if something is happening like this. So I like this kind of discomfort. So for me, it's good if this happens because, as you just said, when this happens, something else happens and we grow and we learn and we connect or whatever. So because we are not in this part of our brain anymore. We become bigger. We use the rest of our body. We use the rest of our whatever. So we're more than just thinking part of us, which is just 100 grams or whatever it is. So it's really, I love if this happens. And I feel like, yoo-hoo! I'm sorry.
Yeah, Boaz here. I also wanted to jump in on this notion of discomfort and also the part of how much do we make this to a topic? How much do we look at this as something that we can reflect on? and how much should we also give this space and talk about it. And I think it's something really important to point it out, to have it acknowledged. But I also think there's something where it can take too much in a discussion, in a process. And personally, also to go back to this question of what is it that brings me joy, it is somehow this idea of progress, of a process that works, of something that comes out of it, of results. And I do think that acknowledging the emotional side is very important to it, but I think for me, it's really not this dichotomy between emotions versus thinking, but rather I think this is very much one balanced, somehow very much connected process.
I agree, Boas. Marjolein here again. And I feel like this, what I call the grown zone, it should always be part of every workshop or does take place anyway. And that makes the workshops work, right? They make that people really go down deep, and when they exceed to pass through that grown zone, then they really get to these committed results. That's what I thought. You said the same, right?
Absolutely.
Hi, Jeremy.
Yeah, hi, Marjolein. So the question, how much space should you take for a sensation or for an emotion, right? As much space as it takes, right? Because whether you want to make space for it or not, it's already there, right? We can try and deny these things out of existence, or we can just make space for the sensation that's already happening. And I think discomfort is probably one of the best...
Why do you think you have so much power that you think you make space for other people's emotions?
Ooh, how do I empower that? By that's a good question. I don't know what makes me think, but maybe it's hubris. But I try not to look into it too much because I can second guess myself for all of eternity, right? But discomfort, I think, is probably one of the most essential topics we can talk about, especially as facilitators, right? In terms of holding and taking care of and being responsible for a group. I mean, this is part of our everyday bread and butter. So how do you deal with it, Boas?
Yeah, I think that's where I wanted to jump in. Also as this part of like, how do you set up or how do you prepare yourself if you go in front of this crowd? If you have this own discomfort as well, maybe a bit of imposter syndrome, maybe this feeling of, should I really be here? Do I belong in this room?
Right. Am I good enough to lead this group of experts?
And I have no idea about what the topic is about. I don't know how this works. Can I still do that? And what I personally find, and that might not be very helpful always, but honesty. I think this idea of just being yourself and honest about what you are. And this leads to a lot of judgment. I really believe if you're honest, then you're going to get judged.
Deal with it.
Yeah. I think the good news is you're going to get judged anyway. Yeah. So I think it's more like at least you're going to get judged for who you are. And I really believe in the capacity of people to change the judgments that they have, that they make. And that's what we need. And I think, so for myself, that's really the thing of just trying to be honest who I am, who I can be, and give your best.
Amen. Amen. Well, to point out your mention of criticism, right? So I'm debilitated sometimes by my fear of criticism, judgment, and rejection, right? And the scary fact of the matter is these are eventualities of experience. The only way I can free myself from the possibility of criticism, judgment, and rejection is by dying and not existing whatsoever, which is a complete waste of this opportunity and vital energy.
And talking about opportunities and this space, and I would like to come back to something that Franz suggested and invited us to share what our kind of experiences are. And also about showing up and imposter syndrome and all this kind of monkey mind going on. Because I reflected on an experience that I knew from my former life working with a university leadership. And I realized that the least prepared my boss was, the more he would speak. And it was very funny because he would have had, I think, more authority and gained more respect from the group by just being silent and asking questions and then listening. But he wasn't prepared. So he faced this inner conflict of, oh my goodness, I didn't do my homework. So I want to show up as a leader. So he just took all the space and he talked so much that everyone felt as if it drained their energy. So my question is, and I took this from our Food for Fish, what are you doing, Franz, to limit yourself not to take too much space in speaking?
Oh, that's quite easy. You just limit yourself to repeating your instruction twice and let people get on with it. Really. So you explained it the second time so they really know what they need to do. And for the rest, I think it's even more important, how do you stop people from just blabbering? Mm-hmm. And that's actually sometimes really hard to get people's attention, and without affronting them a little bit by just cutting them off. I use a lot of gestures, kind looks, little angrier looks, just leaning into people, stepping to the front. So I really think that the use of space and how close you are to people, how you stimulate them by making gestures, by making eye contact, and making sure that other people get involved just by giving them a good look.
Yeah,
that's actually a very powerful way of just not having to talk yourself, just getting people to take the floor.
Yeah. Recently I tried a icebreaker check-in question where I asked the participants to reflect on whether they speak to think or think to speak. And just by having them checking in on this self-reflection made them become aware, am I a blubberer because I need to speak in order to think? Or am I rather this quiet person who rather shuts up, but then if something comes out of my mouth, it makes sense?
Yeah. And just how to get those people to talk is just often when people are really thinking a lot. Yeah, you can see the grooves in their forehead because they're really pulling their eyebrows together. And just noticing, hey, you look like you're thinking quite a lot, helps a lot to get them into the game also. Snap them out of their thinking pattern and trying to share with the people they're with in the group what they're actually thinking.
Hi, Franz. Shane here.
Hey.
I often think about that. That's a real problem to get people to stop talking.
Yep.
One of the methods that I use is I give them a compliment and summarize what they've said and ask them what's the one important thing they need to say before they leave the stage.
Great.
And that kind of short line, it often works. I wonder if other people have other kinds of short lines that they use to transfer power in the room.
Yeah. So one I use is I make a summary of what people say and ask them, am I right? And then just before they're going to inhale, and then I give the floor to somebody else. So just when they're making ready to really the breath, noticing the breath of people. Now they're inhaling. That's your chance to really comfortably change the person who's speaking.
I think it goes really too far when your last thing to do is just start the round of applause, clap them off the stage before they're done.
Yeah,
that's a perfect way to kind of close because we're at 1 hour.
Ah, wonderful.
And I could not miss the chance where you were saying, okay, why don't we cut people short by starting applause? So thank you for that. And I would like, in order not to just have this cold turkey, maybe we can finish with a checkout round. Everyone just reflecting on what they have experienced. So maybe we can pass on the mic.
It's actually, I think it's quite nice to have so many people here just talking how everybody does things. That's what I like about your podcast anyway. I sometimes really don't understand what people are actually doing, even if they talk about it. I have to really use my imagination. How would a session with that person be like? And that's actually one big invitation about your podcast is just to be fly on the wall at somebody else's experience or facilitating.
Boas is my name. Thank you. I thought that was a very interesting session. I really thought it was very interesting to see what happens if 10 facilitators have no facilitator themselves. But I learned a lot, and I think I have a lot to think about again. So thank you very much.
this hour, here's Nadia, this hour was definitely too short. So I would like to stay here like for 2 weeks or something.
I'm Renato. So we had this question about joy. What brings us joy? Actually, this brings me joy, being able to be in a circle like this, where we can just really listen to each other and receive our experience, and that's joyful for me. And I'm left with that joy.
Yeah, this is Max, and my closing thoughts are this hour was a bit too short as well, because my discomfort was dissolving at the moment, and I was feeling ready to jump in another time. At the same time, my mind is feeling clogged. There's all the stuff going on here. I need to digest this a little bit and see how I can work with this in my own workshops.
Thank you, Max. Dit is Mireille here. And my closing words are how an unstructured discussion can be very interesting also.
Rain checking out. I have experienced again why I love what I do.
Jeremy, I feel a deep sense of gratitude and really privileged to be a part of this group, to be a part of this community. It makes me feel like, joyous.
Is Shane checking out? I like that phrase. Thank you, Rain. It really becomes more obvious to me how many different types of facilitation and scenarios that you're all working in. I do a lot of result-oriented, try to find a strategy, try to align and present a vision of it. But I see from everything that each of you has said that there are so many different ways that you can use the skill. And I would like to see many of those applications in the kind of work I do from you.
This is my line. My checkout actually combines well with yours, Shane, because I feel that all this diversity shown here is the human side of our work, right? We've shown again in this experiment that we're all humans as well, being facilitator, and we're just doing our best in the process, but we can't deny this part, and I loved it. Thanks.
Am I the last checking out?
Yes. Yep.
It's Miriam speaking. I felt less discomfort than expected, I must admit. Although at one point when I thought, okay, we are now going in this meta level reflection, I think from my own facilitation style, I'm quite German. I'm very result oriented. I'm very process oriented. And I loved the flow and I loved the intimacy that we kind of created of not only sharing our experiences, our point of views, daring to contradict, daring to spark some conflict into the conversation, how to resolve it, then talking about our emotions, putting it away, coming back in, putting it on a meta level. So I think now I'm very curious now to listen to the show. And I'm curious to hear what the audience is saying. And now I'm even more excited about an experiment that I'm actually planning with Mireille in November. So we are planning this conference that we put the label on Never Done Before. So we want to invite facilitators to join our experiment, to come together to Amsterdam for a 2-day conference where podcast guests present workshops and keynotes about something that they have never done before, and where participants from all over the world can join to experience the new normal of facilitation by going through something that they never experienced before. So I'm super excited about that. So join the show. Thank you. Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.